where we headed?
I was ready to run this,
Oh,
but never mind.
no, I responded to her and said, I'll be there. I don't know what happened there.
I got a little nervous, thanks for being here.
Oh, not a whole lot to talk about, Ray, so. We're ready to go? We're on? Everybody's red button sticking out there?
Yep.
Oh,
Get yours. Just to remind you that everything will be recorded and your button's on, and, you know, you can't take it back after you said it. It's like I'm ringing a bell. Let me just put my glasses on so I'm looking through a fog here. It is 3 o'clock on February 15th. We have a quorum. In attendance are J.T. Thomas, Janice Lancaster, Virginia Stacy, Dick Zukowski, and myself, Joe McCulca, and for the Stoneybrook Advisory Committee meeting today. And we'll start by just review the minutes, because some of you may just be seeing it for the first time, and to discuss if you have any issues, and I'll look for a motion to approve it.
I'll make the motion, Joe, that we approve last month's meeting, minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a second.
You can't.
Okay, it's from
Wow, they
Virginia.
say it.
Any discussion on that? I might have one or two things I want to bring up. Anybody else? Okay, well, let me start with the Stoneybrook irrigation issues. I just want to say that, let everybody know that this was discussed at the board meeting, and I see it is on the agenda for today, so I might let it go until then. But that this is an ongoing situation, and no decisions have been made yet. Revisit proposal for planting, and I guess we'll probably hear from Elle if she has anything new for us to look at today.
I don't, I do have a list of areas and replacements or enhancements needed.
Okay, hold off until we get to the agenda.
I'm
want-
so sorry.
That's okay, not a
Apologize.
problem. I actually jumped ahead, it's my fault. And so that's about all I have. If there's no other questions, anything that's in there, let's have a vote, and all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
hi. I'm Mr. Stan since I wasn't here.
Okay, and I vote aye, so it's one abstention and 4 yes to approve the minutes. Minutes are approved. We'll move down to the next subject, which is the Stoneybrook irrigation. Now, I just want to say, for those of you that weren't at the HOA meeting, we did have a couple of gentlemen from Mainscapes that came down, and they proposed a modification of their initial proposal to do things for our irrigation along Gateway. But the proposal came in at over $50,000. And of course, that didn't fly. We asked them to come back with something concerning just focusing on, I guess, what would be the west side of Pebblebrook, because that's the side that has the sidewalk and the water squirts over that. It gets wet, it gets, algae and mold and whatnot and slippery. And so we asked them to come back. Now, I haven't heard back from them. I'm gonna email Zane again to remind him that we did have a committee, because he was not there at the board meeting the last time. We would consider doing some things just on that west side, running north and south, which comes down to irrigating the thin strip of grass that's between the road and the sidewalk separately with a more modest spray, and then installing a different kind of irrigation on the berm that runs up from the sidewalk that would hopefully use less water, be better distributed, and allow for more pressure, which would allow them to have more zones on at one time. That would be to accomplish the shorting the watering time by having, so that if you could run 2 zones at a time because there's still available pressure, we would possibly hope to eliminate the issue of having the water come on too early in the evening and too late in the morning, because you got people walking in the evening and kids going to school in the morning, so we're trying to eliminate that. So I suspect that's not gonna be a pretty proposal when we see it. We are not funded here properly, but the board has discussed it to some extent and is willing to put some of that money up if necessary. And that would be something that, although with elections coming up and the board changing on April 1st, my guess is that probably won't happen until after that. Yeah. So in any case, that's that subject. Do you have anything to add to that?
Not on the irrigation side, I don't.
Okay. So if anybody have any questions on the irrigation subject, it's still a work in progress. If you're interested to hear, hopefully we'll have somebody shows up from Mainscapes at the next board meeting, which
Are they
is
scheduled this Monday?
Monday.
Are they scheduled to come?
Well, I gotta tell you something. They said they would, and I have not, like I said, I have not heard from them. I will
Is
contact
it on the
them.
agenda?
I haven't seen the agenda or didn't look at it
I
yet.
didn't look at it either.
Yeah, I got it, but I didn't look at it. But if they came, it wouldn't have to be on the agenda. It had to be more informational thing. Okay, let's talk about, revisit the proposal for planting. And you were going to start saying something else.
And I'm sorry it's taking so long. Number one, I wasn't, in the early part of it, I was thinking that we probably wouldn't want to be installing anything till about this time of year anyhow.
Right.
And I was having a little bit of issue getting schedules to coordinate so I could have either Margaret or Kathy go out with me. So this morning I was able to get together with Ms. Feinberg and Freddie with Mainscape.
Okay.
And we went through the landscape on Pebble Brook and in the cul-de-sacs in Stoneybrook.
In the circles in the cul-de-sac.
That's correct. I made a list here. I think there's 20 separate locations. And I tried to be as explicit as possible with the location of these. You know, sometimes if it's in the middle of the block, it's kind of hard, but I tried very hard to make it very easy for you to be able to tell where exactly I'm talking about and what we want to do in those areas. Some of these 7-gallon plants, we might have been able to use something a little bigger, but we're also trying to hold down costs
cost,
and
they're a
go
lot more
with plants that are going to grow fairly quickly so they fill in.
Gotcha.
Now, I can today, of course, because Mainscape has a set price for each size of these plants, I know that the plants alone would be $4,662. Now, that some of these beds, we're going to be removing material. Mainscape may have a cost associated with that. I know a couple of times they have waived the removal.
Are any of these plants, the plants that were planted recently in the last year or two?
Some of them Mainscape is replacing on their dime,
Okay.
because they were new plants that just did not make it.
Mm-hmm.
This list does also not include, parts of the hedge, the viburnum hedge, that will need to be replaced due to the lack of irrigation. So, it's not new, newly installed plants by Mainscape that didn't make it, nor is it plants that were affected by the irrigation loss.
Can I ask?
These are pretty much existing beds or places in the hedge where there's a gap that needs to be filled in.
Who is ultimately gonna be responsible for replacing the hedges that didn't survive because?
Mr. Shoemaker told me to make a list, get the price, and bring him the proposal.
Okay.
Where it's gonna go from there, I could not say
Oh.
positively one way or the other, and I don't even wanna take a stab at it.
If he wants to talk to me, you know how to get a hold of me, okay?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
anybody else here?
Talk into the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, I backed off. Let's see. All right, so then what you're going to be proposing is essentially new items that are needed, and Margaret is in agreement with that.
Absolutely. She went
Okay.
with us on this drive-through, and again, it wasn't just I went through and picked plants. It was a discussion amongst the three of us about how to either A, pick the best plant for that area, or to pick the best plant to balance out the intersection. Because there was
Understood.
some places we could have, tried something new and different, but it just would have looked out of place.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't balance with what was across the street from it, on the same road. We have to kind of keep that in mind so that,
Well, I trust your and
We don't
Margaret's
piecemeal
opinion, and if that's
anything.
your recommendation, no, we'll
And-
probably go with it.
I should have a formal proposal for you very soon with all of this listed out. including any removal or pine straw that they would want to go back in and touch up the bed with. I should have a formal proposal for you for this very shortly. As
Okay.
soon as that comes in, I will be happy to forward that to all committee members,
I would appreciate that.
and that way you'll have it in hand and you can review it prior to your next meeting.
Is there a remote possibility we'll have that by next Monday, or is that too soon?
There is a remote possibility.
Okay, because that way we can distribute it also to board members.
Not next Monday, this Monday coming up.
When I say next Monday, I mean this coming
There's a
Monday.
remote possibility. I certainly would not guarantee.
When I say next
But-
Monday, I mean the one coming
He'll
up.
try.
I won't say it's impossible.
No, okay, understand. If it happens, then it gives me a chance to
That would be
distribute it in
great
time
for
the-
you,
for
because
the
then you have a
board
little
meeting.
more time to review.
Because even though the board doesn't necessarily have to approve something that is within our budget here, that we can
They're
handle.
residents too.
They're residents, and they also would like to know what's going on, so in
I absolutely
case
understand.
there's any objection. Well, that sounds great. Anybody have any questions for Al about that? Any opinions on that?
No, this is good timing, as I was gonna bring up a couple of things, but this covers it.
It's on here? Well, if there's anything on here that any of you folks have any questions about, you feel free to contact me at any time, and I'll be happy to answer questions and help out in any way I can.
Okay.
I guess I do have a question. The trees and by the lakes and all, this is winter time, so they've lost their leaves, they're not
The
dead.
cypress, yeah.
That's correct. They, the cypress trees on the ponds, those are bald cypress. And they do go dormant. As soon as our nighttime temperatures get below 70, they go dormant. Now, with that said, as soon as they start to show new growth, I'm going to be out there checking the trees, and anything that does not show regrowth and that it is coming back out of its dormancy, there is a plan to remove those.
I would agree with that, and I was gonna bring that up. I'm glad you said that. Because there are some that just, there are some that go back to day one
Yeah,
and
there
have
are.
not grown at all. They're ugly, and they're unsightly, and they need to be removed.
Well, we know what happened there.
Yeah.
And that's the reason we came in before, and we
Mhm.
took some out and
And put
replaced them.
and replace, and then planted some additional.
And that's what we'll do again. But as soon as they start flushing out, that's what we call it, they start flushing new growth,
Mhm.
I'm going to be checking them all closely, and anything that does not flush new growth this spring is
We
going
gotta
to
get
be
'em out.
removed.
I agree.
Now, there's a lot of them on the backside of, it's designated Lake 58, it's the long one along State Road 82. There's some on the backside of that,
I will say this,
now, I realize they're not on Pebblebrook, but you do have a lot of people that live on this side of that pond, and that's what they see when they
I
walk
understand.
out too. So, I have to take it, consider both areas that way. It's somebody's view.
my
And-
suggestion wouldn't even be to dig them out, just cut down to the ground.
Flush
and-
cut.
Yeah, and get rid of them.
Yeah.
We can have a little bonfire down at the clubhouse or something.
Well, wherever there's room and space, or wherever it's needed, because those trees are a requirement, they are deep lake trees. We may have to replace some as a requirement of the development order. And,
In the past, I believe that Gateway Services did that to protect.
That's
our road.
correct.
Mhm.
we did do that,
That's correct, which I'm glad I brought up at the time.
yes. We did do that, and we replaced several of those, and all of those replacements were done, along the ponds that are bordering Pebblebrook.
That's correct, I agree.
And those are looking real,
I have a
those,
question, have you started planting some other littorals along the lake?
in Stoneybrook?
Yeah,
No?
I've seen some, all of a sudden, fireflies popping up in a couple of spots that I'd never seen them before. And they
Oh,
were in
that-
clumps like somebody planted them.
That's possible. Somebody may have planted them. Yeah, there are residents in Gateway that love those plants, and they
Okay.
will go plant them.
No kidding.
When they do, I let them stay.
Yeah, I understand.
In the water?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the water.
If they are a native aquatic plant, yeah,
The only thing, they do suck some of the nutrients out.
that's
and
right.
The thing about it is though, when it gets cold, they turn brown. They get a
They
little.
do get brown and,
But there are spots
Unsightly.
where they never existed before, all of a sudden I'm seeing
We
them. And
talked
this is not behind houses either. This is,
We talk about the greenstone?
no, I'm talking about a couple of the lakes, like the one that backs up to Bluestone. That you'll see some fireflies that are popping up, in a couple of clumps, about maybe half a dozen clumps along the street side of the lake, which I don't remember being there, not to that extent anyway.
Right.
Well, birds,
Well-
do birds drop seeds and stuff like that after they?
They
eat?
do.
They do, so it could have just been them.
It's possible.
Nature spreads seeds for us all the time, and
They're good-
oftentimes
really
it's
good
where
with
we
the
didn't
weeds,
want
I
them to
think.
spread. But
All right, so
they-
that
happens.
wasn't us doing
Now,
it. That
if you are
was-
finding it most unsightly, I mean, I do have permission to remove thalia.
Okay, let me say this, no one has complained to me. My
Okay.
wife and I do notice it. We know where the name Fire Flag comes from, you know, we're familiar
Yes.
with that. You know, we walk 6 Mile Cypress and the slough all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you see them in there, and all of a sudden I saw them in our community, and that's
Right.
what caught my attention.
Yeah.
But all right, that's it. I have nothing else unless anyone else does.
No?
Or do we, obviously, we have erosion in our lakes like many other communities do. And I think we have 1 or 2 lakes that are on the schedule do you
Yes.
have any idea when that's gonna happen? And what's gonna happen as far as the planting of littorals at that time?
I do know that there are a couple of ponds in Stoneybrook that are currently on the restoration list. I can't give you a date or time or even
Okay.
an
I know
estimated
it's under
time
your
frame
control.
at this point.
Mhm.
To do that, I know they're looking at 5 ponds right now with the state revolving fund, and I don't remember that Stoneybrook is one of those. I don't think it's one of those 5.
I thought the one behind Margaret was on that list, but I
That's
could
what
be
I thought,
wrong.
too.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the one on the other side, that's between Pebblestone and Greenstone, which
Yeah.
I believe is Lake
I
61,
don't know them by number. but
is
okay.
probably the one with the worst erosion
Really?
in there.
Okay,
And I know that one was on the list. Where it's at as far as what phase, or where it's at in that phase, I'm not exactly positive. That project is basically being handled by our engineering firm.
is, the firm
But
that was?
as far as your question on littorals,
Yeah,
littorals are definitely part of the pond restoration project, as long as the development order calls for them.
okay. When we go to plant them, do we communicate with the homeowners that these things have to stay? We don't want anybody thinking it's weeds blocking their view and they're out there cutting them down or spraying them or something.
I would,
Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
and actually to the landscapers too.
yeah. We
Right.
need to make sure and communicate what's going on there, because I'm not sure most of the people have any idea this is coming.
Right, I understand.
I know my guy, he'll he'll weed the banks, just because right now, I mean, you don't wanna ride a lawnmower off one of those edges, you're talking 2-foot drop.
Right, yeah,
That's
there are
true.
some bad drop-offs, there
Yeah,
are.
Yeah, from erosion, well, liquefaction, when it gets muddy and it just,
I had some solar lights that were in my yard, there's no yard where they're at. right
actually,
now.
I had one person, and it wasn't that lake, it's the other one that's between, Jewelstone and Pebblestone. I actually had someone living on Jewelstone that told me that their irrigation is sticking out of the ground in a couple of places.
I could,
It's
yeah.
actually, you know, it used to
Yeah.
be some feet back from the edge, and now
I think
that's
since-
their
I
property.
think since I've
Yeah,
been there,
there's
okay.
several addresses down there that I could show you that exact same thing
I
that's
think I've
going
lost
on.
3 feet probably.
Right now, what they're looking at is getting the worst of the worst
Understood.
taken care of, because these ponds, these first 5 ponds, you're talking about a 2-foot drop. There's some of them out there with a 3-foot, or worse.
And-
There's big stones on the bank. They used
Yeah.
big stones to finish the pond bank, and now behind the stones is big gaping holes. I have to be careful walking through there.
It
Imagine the
gets- it gets
homeowner
wet,
having
it
to
gets-
mow and maintain the
The
lawn.
clay gets real slippery,
Are they
and the kid can slip in there when it gets too close
Are
to
they
the edge.
backfilling it up, or are they putting a barrier thing down?
Depends on, each pond could be handled differently.
That's correct, that's what
Yeah,
my
we have to
understanding
get
is.
to it and survey the bank, and take surveys and make sure that we're doing it the right way for that particular pond, because
Okay.
each pond can be different. The
Anybody-
soils around it, the rocks around it.
Are they done
they're
with
different.
cleaning out the pipes? Is that?
No,
still-
they're still working in there.
They're between, Stone Valley and Ivory Stone.
Okay, any surprises that you know of?
No, not since we found JT's video.
We are being
No,
recorded.
I'm just kidding, it was not JT's video, we've just been teasing him about that all along.
But, yeah, I'm sure there was plenty, rocks and,
Now,
Other
yeah, they
stuff in
found
there.
toys, they found a Scooby-Doo fishing pole and,
It's funny.
but yeah, lots of stones and things like that, but,
probably all the way back from day one.
yeah.
Yep. Anybody else about
That's
that?
it.
Who's taking minutes?
They are
being
going to
recorded?
use this,
Okay.
and Severin Trent is going to be generating a set of minutes, but they're going to be brief, an overview.
Is that
Okay,
the
I
one-
am going to excuse myself
Sure,
at this,
appreciate
at
your
this
help.
time. Again, if I can help you folks with anything, or if you have any questions about what you read here, don't
Thank you, Bill.
hesitate to ask me.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to help.
Thank you all. I know, I'm not.
No, that's all this is about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll state it again, because now we're on our own, and so we run our own meeting, which we usually do, but we don't have anybody now to ask questions. And Diane will not be in the room anymore, and so all we can do, at this point, if we do have questions, is state them, and hopefully we'll receive a response when they're reviewed, okay? That would be the type. I'm not happy about it, don't know how it's gonna work. We
Could
will
this
see.
be done at our clubhouse?
Well, technically, no, because we are a committee organized under Gateway, not under Stoneybrook. And I actually, to be honest, and I'm happy to have them hear this, actually have wondered about if we wouldn't terminate this committee, and what would the results be, and make it a Stoneybrook committee that becomes the advisory committee for Gateway. Simply because that would release us from the rather strict sunshine laws, and make it easier for us to communicate between each other, and even have a meeting if we wanted to down there, and easier to get things done.
You want that in here so that?
Absolutely, I want them to know how I feel,
Yeah,
because I don't think all the committees are following that rule.
Okay.
We do, you don't hear from me, and we don't discuss these things out of this room, but it's hard to operate. We meet once a month, and it's hard enough to operate as it
Yeah.
is. But nevertheless, here we are. But
Yeah.
that's just something I'm throwing out there, so if anyone's
Sounds good.
listening, it's food for thought. I don't know if we can do that or not. But in any case, going on to the next subject. We've heard about the plantings, and that's good, and we get the numbers. I think that will be within the budget, we'll be able to handle that. The other big elephant in the room are the street signs. Now, I will tell you this, our board has been looking at this for some time, and came up with some numbers that were in the upper thirties to change all our signs.
Wow.
We're talking thousands here. And there's a lot of signs, there's more out there than you realize, things aren't cheap. So we came up with, Margaret and I talked about it, and I'll run it by all of you, let's go back and revisit this and see if some of these can be salvaged, fixed, welded, painted, whatever, in place without even being dug up, straightened up, I don't know, we'll see. But also, at the same time we were having this discussion, one of the young girls from our management company, Castle, actually mentioned to us that they use someone else that might be less expensive. So at that point in time, and this was a couple weeks ago, and I was gone last week, so I don't know if anything's happened on that, but supposedly the office was gonna follow up, and Paul is aware of it, and to see, to bring that other company out, take a look at this with a suggestion and an estimate.
interesting.
Because we really can't handle this in the 004 fund. We don't have the money there, it wasn't budgeted
Not
for that.
$30,000.
Not $30-some-odd thousand. So that would require, and the board has, in its preliminary discussion, said they would consider funding that. But, let's see if we can get it done cheaper
Yeah.
anyway. So, that's
Okay.
that subject. We're not gonna make any decisions on street signs at this point in time until we get some updated proposals and estimates. You're quiet. Any thoughts on that?
The street signs, no, it needs to be done, and
Oh, I know
I
it
wouldn't
needs to
even
be done.
mind, I mean, this is more of a Stoneybrook issue, I wouldn't mind trying to figure out what we can do with some of these mailboxes.
Yeah, that's not a discussion for here.
I know.
That's a board discussion, we can talk about that in board
Yeah.
comments. But yeah, I agree. It is the responsibility, the documents clearly stated, of the homeowner to maintain their mailboxes. We don't own them, they do. It's also the responsibility of the community to get on top of, or give a hard time to tell the homeowners, they gotta, just like maintaining your property, maintaining your mailbox is an issue, and some of them are terrible. It ain't that hard to clean them up. It ain't that hard to spray paint them. That's what we did, and ours looked pretty good, relatively speaking. We did that a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
You know,
maybe I'll get that on the agenda for this Monday.
yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. But the mailboxes are probably not for here. So at this point in time, we've talked about these things. We haven't come to any conclusions or votes, but we will review them at the next meeting. But I'll go with any committee request. There's no audience, so anybody have anything?
Where is she?
Yeah, well, she hasn't come, since she's a supervisor now, she doesn't come all the time anymore. She comes less often. If nobody does,
Nope, Not
This
here.
is just our comments.
yeah.
I don't know if you guys have noticed yet, on top of every street lights in the community, so if anyone ever brings it up to you, just so you guys all know, they changed out all the photo cells on top of all the street lights. So if you see them, they're not cameras, but don't tell people they're not cameras, because, you know, let them assume what they think. But, I met one of the guys, he was doing it, he was in my front yard, he handed me one. They're radio frequency, they have GPS, and they know when the lights are off or when they're on.
No kidding.
So
So
they
they'll
will- so they
know
would
when
know
they're not working.
When they are working during the day and when they're not working and everything, so
Yeah.
they're gonna.
Take away some of the responsibility
Of our
of
burden.
us contacting them and then waiting weeks for them to come out and
Correct.
fix it. Well, I hope that works.
And these things are a
Makes
lot
things
bigger than, cause he handed me an old one, the old one was just some small, just, you know, falling apart in my hand type
Yeah.
thing. These things look
more
like.
efficient. If anybody asks you anything about those lights, say, well, you know, I heard there might be cameras.
Because that's one of the biggest complaints that I feel like
Cameras.
is.
They have been
they-
complaining about the dogs, you know?
Catch you speeding.
Yeah, well,
So
that's a
that's
stretch.
what it is. So, that's all I have.
Well, that's good information. I did not know that. Okay, learned something today. I don't have anything at this time. Basically, we talked about what was on my mind. Take a look, go over, you know, you have a list here, you know, get a chance, look over it. If you have any concerns or comments, get it back to Diane and she'll get it over to us, either the rest of us, and see what
Well,
you
when are
think.
you going to, find out about having the meetings up there? This meeting up at the club?
Let's just say that was a very preliminary.
Suggestion.
Well, I won't even get
Idea?
that strong. And
Right.
something that was bouncing around in my head today. So I'm
Okay.
throwing it out there. That ain't happening soon. Because that would require, I think, some discussion. Tony was gonna get involved, I can almost guarantee you. And it would require a vote here by the Board of Supervisors, I'm sure. And it may not even be legal, I don't know.
If
Nothing
you think
can-
about it, I mean, it would be more convenient for us, but how many times do we have April come in? Or who's the new,
Chris?
Reluctantly,
or L?
reluctantly.
Well, April probably had the first time I've seen her in a while, but, you know, I know L comes in a lot, that is something.
If she's available and she's in the office.
She probably comes every, at least,
Well, over the
Half the
last few
time.
months, it has been reduced
Yeah.
because she's been out running around.
well, she also leaves earlier too.
I know,
Yeah.
she leaves, I think, about noon.
3:30.
In any case, yeah, I understand, you know,
It's the
but if
fight.
it's gonna come down to just the 6 or 5 or 4 or whatever there is of us sitting here and getting recorded, that seems, you know,
And getting away from the sunshine law.
yeah. Just food for thought, that's what I'm basically saying, and we'll toss that around at a later date. Let's discuss the next meeting. Right now, March 8th is proposed. Anybody have any comments or issues with
right
that
now,
date?
I have nothing. I don't know what my calendar is.
Neither do I.
I'm going out of town, I actually get back on the 7th, we'll see, I mean, it's gonna, well, I don't know what's gonna happen. I might have to skip that one.
My life is very
Anybody
boring.
have any recommendations, changing subjects here? I'll call it the 8th if there's a big problem. I assume that Diane will still communicate with us to ask us if we're coming or not, so
Mhm.
therefore, you know,
Well, somebody
we'll have an
has-
idea. We can't
Somebody
make,
has to, because we can't.
I know.
They-
They're gonna have to.
She didn't, did she send out I know she sent the meeting things, but she didn't send out an email saying that we're gonna have a meeting. if we
Not
had a quorum.
specifically, but in there it did sort of imply, like, you know,
But not recently.
We're used to
yeah,
her.
it was a couple weeks ago.
She, I was gonna say she doesn't, she usually
Yeah,
doesn't.
there was no communication.
Was she here
recently.
was she here last week?
I was not, so I don't know.
Yes, she
You were here
was.
last month?
I wasn't here last
Yeah,
week.
she was here.
Last week.
She
No,
was
I'm
here
sorry,
last
last month, last
Last
meeting.
month, yeah, I was here.
Yeah.
She was here, so this is her first meeting now?
Not being here.
Okay, cause I wasn't here last meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna leave it at the 8th at 3 o'clock.
Let's
I
see
know we had
what-
tossed around changing times too, but nobody really, I didn't get a strong feel one way or the other, so we'll leave it at 3 unless someone wants to bring that up.
Kathy brought up about the other gentleman coming. You heard nothing about that from him, or?
Name was in name was in the minutes.
Yeah, it's in the minutes.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I will ask her about that, because I heard nothing. No one's contacted me.
Ron,
Ron where's Vicky,
I'll check with her.
Muddy
okay?
Creek.
Well, I will check with her again on that, because it's one of those things, I backburnered, figured I'd hear if somebody was interested, and I haven't heard anything, but I will see what I can do. So we'll call it the 8th, call that a good, a fix. And I really don't have anything else, so I'll take a motion, to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
second.
All right.
Okay.
That was Virginia made the motion, and J.T. Thomas made the second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is
Right here.
adjourned. Thank you very
You're
much.
right. We got out by 4, Joe.
Yep, press, hit your off button there, okay?
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and just hit stop recording. Even though the camera is terrible on this.